And I ended up in Glovo. Glovo was super early days.
What was Glovo in this moment?
So when I arrived, I would say the product was pre-product market fit. It was an MVP. If it started raining and more orders came in, basically the entire office, including, the CEO and the engineers and myself, you take your rain jacket, you get on your bicycle and you start delivering orders. So definitely very, very early days. When I joined, I think it was something around the order of 20 orders per day. Late 2015, if you opened up Twitter and you read the tweets about Glovo, people were literally professing their love of the product, literally saying things like, I will marry Glovo.
You were in the moment that McDonald's started in Glovo. So how was this experience?
The holy grail of any startup is to find a traction channel that is huge and as cheap as possible, ideally free, right? And for Glovo, it was McDonald's. We promised them a bubble. So they got their own bubble. Of course, they love this, right? And Uber Eats, they couldn't offer them a bubble.
You decide to move to another adventure, and this adventure is Ara.
How can we reimagine meetings to make them dramatically more efficient than they are today? The root cause of all this is time synchronization.
And the product managers. Bienvenidos una semana más al podcast de entrevista a Product Leaders. Hoy estamos con Bartek Kunowski. ¿Qué tal, Bartek?
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Dani.
Encantado de que estés aquí. We are going to switch to English. This episode will be in English. So, just to know you a little bit more, Bartek, you've been CPO at Glovo and other companies that we will talk now. But a quick overview of your background, 5 minutes or 6 minutes, whatever. How do you find your background? How was it?
Yeah. So I grew up in Canada.
You are from there? You're from Canada?
Yeah, I was born in Poland, but at a very young age we moved to Toronto. So I went to school there. University, I studied computer science. It was actually called University of Waterloo. It's a pretty good university in Canada. And one of the really cool things they do in that university is they do this internship program. So I did a bunch of internships programming in different companies. And my last two were actually at Amazon.com in Seattle. The actual CTO of Amazon flew over to my university to do interviews, and I was one of the people recruited. So that was an amazing opportunity. And then I ended up joining Amazon full-time as an engineer when I graduated. It was my first job.
How was it? Working as an engineer in Amazon, first-time job?
Yeah.
It could be a dream for a lot of people.
It was intense. So this was more than 20 years ago. Amazon's a different company than it is now. Of course, I got to shake Jeff Bezos' hand. And, of course, it was still, they were making waves in the US. And they were really building something, quite amazing at the time. Like right now, we take it for granted that, you make an order and the next day you had packages. But at that time, this was a really revolutionary thing. And, I moved to Seattle and started working in this company where, as a user and everyone, my colleagues and everyone, you could just order and packages would be arriving in your doorstep. It was really just like a wow experience. Anyway, so I was an engineer and I worked on the consumer side of things from the very, very get-go. I ended up building two products, one of which has already been deprecated, but it's still interesting to talk about. And the other one is still live today. So the one that's live today is if you open up an Amazon web page and you go to a product page, so you're looking at a product, and if you scroll down, at some point you get to a place where it's the Q&A section where people can ask questions and answers to the product. So I built the first version of that.
Really? Wow.
Which doesn't sound impressive now, but building a feature like that can scale to the numbers they could scale 20 years ago was actually an interesting technical and architectural challenge. And the other feature that I built, which has been deprecated, but was actually even more interesting, was called the early adopters feature. And basically at the time, I worked with someone, which today you'd call a data scientist. And Amazon had a lot of data even at those times. This is before the word even data warehouse existed.
They started actually from data.
Everything. And basically what this data scientist did is they looked through all the past orders and purchase history of customers, and they tried to identify which of the Amazon customers are early adopters. And early adopters are people who consistently purchase products early on in the technology adoption lifecycle.
But not consumer products, or yes?
Yeah. So, for example, if you're an early adopter in the electronics category, you're someone who consistently buys products that maybe the majority of people are not buying, but you just buy these super. So you're the first one to buy a Segway.
Okay.
You're the first one to buy a Roomba.
They're adopters.
Early adopters
of a consumer product. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea was to identify these people, and then once you have these people identified, see what are they purchasing today. Because then you can get an insight of like, what are the cool up and coming
trends?
Trends. And then the idea is to surface this on the website. So if a grandmother wants to buy, I don't know, let's say in the category of music, they want to find not, the Britney Spears of the time, but some artist who is like super new and upcoming, they can go to the early adopters page and find that product.
That will be also super useful for tech products, actually. So just to know because there's a lot of people that are super beta early adopters, and there is like a mode for these people, like they are early adopters.
Yeah.
And it's people that has this AI to see the products that will work. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So that was an amazing experience for me, and after that, I took a year off. I traveled the world, backpacked in Europe and South America. And one of the conclusions I made during this time is I didn't want to code anymore, but I wanted to stay in software.
Why didn't you want to code more?
At the time, coding, and probably even now too, but at the time it was a very lonely job. And I wanted to, even though I was pretty good at it, and I think there had moments where I really got into it, coding through the night. I really wanted to have a job where I could interact more with people. That was kind of the general.
More social skills.
Yeah. And so I did a few things in between. I moved into Europe. I had my own outsourcing company at some point in Poland. But I ended up in Spain about 12, 13 years ago. And at the time, right now, Spain, both Barcelona, Madrid, but other cities as well, the tech ecosystem is booming quite a bit. And there's tons of opportunities for everyone. But at the time when I arrived, there was literally only two tech companies in Spain where they spoke English in the office.
Okay.
One of which was Softonic and the other one was Tuenti.
Okay.
The social network. Okay. So for people who come from Spain.
Yeah. Here in the podcast, we had a lot of people from Tuenti.
Yeah.
And it's insane, like the school of Tuenti.
Yeah.
In a product thing. Yeah? So people that now is working in companies or building their own, a lot of people have come from Tuenti, and it's insane the way that these people works in product. So it's super interesting, this school.
Yeah. I think Tuenti was, I think, the first tech company in Spain that was like Silicon Valley grade culture and everything, how they worked. The talent density was insane. Of course, they brought in lots of foreigners as well. So it wasn't just local talent.
Yeah.
And that's why, you have this.
No, totally. It's insane. It's like, it's amazing.
Tuenti Mafia right now.
Tuenti Mafia. Yeah.
My
you are one of them.
My co-founders, my co-founder right now of the current startup, which we'll talk about later, Jordi, we actually met at Tuenti. So I led some product teams, and he was an engineer at Tuenti. And so Tuenti was really cool. I mean, they were headquarters in Madrid, but we had a product development office here in Barcelona. I was kind of like a GPM, like a group product manager. And we focused on monetization products and also growth products.
What does Tuenti in this moment? So this is before Telefónica.
No, this was after. So this This was at an interesting stage where a number of things were happening. One was the Telefónica purchase happened. Two, the world was moving to mobile. From like a web. Facebook was starting to attack international markets. Okay. And so this is a phase where we were moving from really a very heavy social network to more of a messaging platform, and the move to mobile. It was a really interesting time to be there. And so after Tuenti, my co-founder Jordi, he ended up going to Silicon Valley and he went to Instagram and Snapchat. So he continued his career there, and I ended up in Glovo.
Okay.
And so the history of how I ended up in Glovo was actually a really interesting one. Glovo was super early days.
What was Glovo in this moment? It was a pitch deck? It was a product?
So Glovo, at the time, they were operating in Barcelona. They were a very, very small team. And I actually participated. They did a very small crowdfunding round. And so I put in a very, very, very small check in the crowdfunding round. And what happened was, there was, I think, 40, investors there. And they needed to choose one person to represent all these people in the board of directors. So Oscar and Sasha, the founders of Glovo, they went through the LinkedIn profiles and they ended up contacting me because I had a background in tech and product and so on and so forth. And so I said, yeah, sure, why not? I'll do it. And now, unfortunately, not unfortunately, actually fortunately, but I felt a sense of responsibility for these shareholders. Like I'm representing them, I need to add some value. And so what I would do is every week I would open up the Glovo app. I would do some orders, of course, and of course I would find lots of things to improve in the app, everything from bugs to UX that didn't make sense, whatever it is. And I would write a very short email with bullet points to Oscar saying, hey, you need to fix this. This doesn't make sense. You need to change this, add that, and so on and so forth. And I would send it to Oscar, and he would reply he would reply right away saying, hey, yeah, I forwarded to my engineering team. Thanks so much. And then after the third email, Oscar said, hey, let's go for coffee.
Let's go for coffee.
And
your
of course,
feedback is the best one.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was the best one or the only one or whatever it was, but I think it was good enough for Oscar to say, hey, do you want to help us build this product? And that's how I joined Glovo.
They had product managers in this time, or they had product people? You were the first one.
No, I was the first one. So yeah, I mean, Glovo, I was employee number 10. So Glovo at the time was, the founders. I think an engineering team was 5 or 6 people. And Oscar and Sasha asked me to lead basically all product and engineering. We kind of had a CTO, but I pretty much led that team from then on. And so I was Glovo for about 8 years. I was there from the super early days all the way post exit. Glovo got acquired by Delivery Hero for a couple billion. And I stayed a little bit post exit. And after Glovo, now I started a new startup, Ara. With Jordi, my coworker from the 20 days, and with Ara, we are disrupting the video conferencing market. So think Zoom and Google Meets.
Super cool.
It's a bit of a moonshot, but our mission is really to make meetings like radically more efficient. And I think we'll talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. But before that, just to know, like, as you mentioned, in the early days of Glovo, then you were in the first days there. Yeah. So what did you find in terms of product? Like, what did you find there when you came to Glovo?
So when I arrived, I would say the product was pre-product market fit. We'll talk about that in a second. It was an MVP. So basically it was, this is what I can describe. So first of all, the consumers, they had a very basic app, and they had 2 buttons on it. One button said, get me anything. And the other one was deliver something from point A from point B. Okay. And then you would click one of those buttons. You can type in, it was free text. You can type in whatever you want. There was a simple checkout flow, and that would send your order. And then there was a back office where we had some customer service agents. And then the couriers also had like a very, very basic app. But it was super, super basic, right? So like we didn't even have, like just to give you a few examples, we didn't actually have order dispatching implemented. So when like a customer made an order, it would show up in our back office, and the customer service agent needed like to click on the order, select it, and assign it to a courier. Like there was like a drop down, like imagine a drop down box where you'd see, I don't know, the 10 couriers working or whatever it was, and you choose the courier, and it would sign the order to the courier. And if it started raining and we more orders came in, basically the entire office, including the CEO and the engineers and myself, you take your rain jacket, you get on your bicycle or your scooter, and you start delivering orders. So definitely very, very early days. I think the product was live already 6 months. We were operating just in Barcelona when I joined. And we were doing, I think it was something around the order of 20 orders per day.
20 orders per day. Now it's more than, I don't know how it's the numbers now.
More, yeah.
A lot. But okay, so you arrive Glovo, you have this product, pre-product market fit. Mm-hmm. How is this path to product market fit, and how do you feel it? Like, wow, guys, we have something here in one moment, actually, no? Yeah. Like, how was that experience to see a company looking at product market fit?
Yeah. Okay. So we need to break it down. So first of all, Glovo is a 3-sided marketplace, which means you have users and consumers on one side. There's like you or me with the app making orders. Then you have couriers. And then we have like partners. These are like the merchants. So whether it's a restaurant or a pharmacy, whatever it is. And they all have products, right? They have different products with different use cases. And so there's actually different product market fit for all three of them. And they need to be all reached more or less in scale and thing. Let's start talking about the consumer side, because I think it's a very interesting one, but I'll touch on the other two as well, because they're also important to not forget about. So on the consumer side, it was really interesting. When I entered, at the very beginning, I needed some time to learn about like what's happening on the ground. So it was basically just taking the existing app, fixing some basic UX issues that I had, making the UI a little bit more delightful, and so on and so forth. Fixing bugs. Just kind of getting my my feet wet at the company. And what was really interesting at the time was we had a very vocal group of users who were ecstatic about the product. And you saw it especially on Twitter. So back in that time, in late 2015, if you opened up Twitter and you read the tweets about Glovo, people were literally professing their love of the product, but literally saying things like, I will marry Glovo, or, I never need to leave the house again because, I found the perfect thing, or but tweet after tweet like this. I don't know, two or three. And it's great, obviously, when you're working on a product and you're reading such public things, there's a tendency to say, "Wow, job done," right? I mean, what else can we do now? And
it was random people, people that they enter to the app, users of the app. I had no idea who they are, but super. But writing the most amazing things, 11 out of 10 for NPS, that's you can ask for any more. Yeah.
And so, there's a tendency to think okay, we got product market fit, everything's great, let's just keep going. But at the same time as that was happening, I started hearing and seeing and detecting an almost completely different kind of feedback
in the other
on the other side. And it was a lot more subtle, it wasn't as loud. I first started, my first moments was when I was already working at it, but I was showing the application to some friends of mine and friends of my social circle, good friends of mine, And, I'd be on a weekend and I'm like, hey, check out this cool thing I'm working on, Glovo, you can order that, blah, blah, anything. And they would be like, wow, super excited and everything. So I'd say, yeah, okay, great. They download the app. I even gave them a promo code so they can do their first order free. And of course, and that kind of validated this is an amazing app. But then 1 or 2 weeks would pass, and I would go into our back office and I would see my good friends, they haven't made an order, and that was very confusing. And so I would go back to them and say, hey, I showed you this app, you got this free order, you said the thing, and they started saying things to me that I haven't heard and I hadn't read on Twitter. So they would say things like, yeah, but it's but this box, it's not clear exactly what can I order. I won't, how much do I have to pay for each product? What is Glovo going to charge me for this? They said, I don't even know, what's the delivery time going to be? When am I going to receive this? They complained about the delivery cost. So at the time we had flat delivery pricing. So no matter what the Glovo was, it was €5.50 because this was the cost that we paid. That cost went directly to the couriers. So basically couriers had a flat
zero margin there, but you were doing.
So we would just pass that into the Glovers. But of course, a friend of mine was saying, this is great, but I don't want to pay €5 for a McDonald's delivery, for example, or whatever it is. And then I started calling, so that was, my social circle, but then I would go into my back office and, I would start calling, again, people who had downloaded the app, had registered, but again, gotten that free coupon, but never actually made the order. I'd start calling them and say, hey, what's up? This is the most amazing app ever. And
look at Twitter.
And I was hearing the same thing, just like that I heard from my friends. And that's when I things always kind of connect themselves. I went back to the whole thing about early adopters. So, if you ever read the book Crossing the Chasm, and that whole lesson, and it's been a book that's one of the best sellers for many years for product people. It was the perfect example of what happens for an innovative product. So on one hand, you have innovators and early adopters. And these people, they're super excited about new technologies. They're not so worried about the details, whether they're buggy, whether they're too expensive or not. Their big motivation is trying new things out and they get a lot of social capital about letting the world know that they're the early adopters of the thing. Today we call them influencers.
Okay.
On social media,
Totally.
but they've existed for forever.
Yeah.
And so these people that were tweeting about marrying, Glovo on Twitter, these were the influencers of the time, right?
Yeah.
And so the product was working great for them. But if you want to be successful in a big scale, you can't just,
these are super small niche of people.
You need to make the product
for a heavy user,
for the majority.
Yeah.
And this is where there's a big gap between the expectations of the early adopters and the majority. And so when I was hearing all these kind of, this is super expensive, I want to hear the product, blah, blah, this was the majority talking.
And this is quite tricky because you have to identify that they are early adopters, because if not, you would think that, yes, it's a small portion of heavy users that could like the product, but it's not. It's an early adopter.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the end, once you take a step back, it's pretty easy because you see that their concerns are completely different. Like the people who are in the main majority, for them, it's a lot more of a cost benefit analysis. It's not about being cool and taking your phone out at a party and ordering a beer and showing things. No, it's like
how much it costs.
How much does it cost, and does it actually provide me value of compared to my alternatives?
Yeah.
And they also don't like uncertainty, right? So they want to, when they're using a product, they want to know details about how much exactly is it going to cost, when is it going to be delivered, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And once we kind of, realize this, then we realize, wow, we need to do a radical change to the way this product works in order to cross the chasm and actually get product market fit. Right?
And how do you do that?
Yeah. So then we need to tackle all the problems that I listed. And the solution is, we need to build a product in such a way so that people can actually see the products that they're ordering, that they actually have the prices of the products they're ordering, that they know how long it's going to take to deliver it. And we needed to find a way to drop the delivery pricing significantly. And this is where what we call the global marketplace started, which basically meant that we actually needed to partner with our merchants, because up until then, Glovers would have a credit card and they would just literally go to the merchant and just buy it, from the store directly. Yeah. And now what we realized we needed to do is we needed to actually establish commercial relationships with the merchants, and that they would give us their catalog of products. So they would get the prices and the images and so on and so forth. But even more importantly, now we can have a revenue sharing, or basically a commission. We can charge the businesses because we're driving them volumes, and that allows us to drop the delivery prices for the consumers.
Yeah, that's super cool. One question here, Bartek, sorry to interrupt you, but the Glovo's vision, it has been super public that Glovo doesn't only deliver food.
Yeah,
they are not Just Eat. They are not other platforms. No, so how was this vision in the early days? And how does that impact in these relations with the partner? Because it's not the same to try to start a marketplace with all these partners, only delivering food, than going to pharmacies, going to electronic companies. Yeah. So it's not easy, this part, because there's a lot of possibilities there,
Yeah, so we when we were building the marketplace, we had already data to look at, which is from the previous app, the text-based app. We actually categorized the orders into different categories of orders, right? And we saw that we had, we had food, we had people ordering from the pharmacy, we had people ordering headphones, electronic stuff, and alcohol late at night, and so on and so forth. So that's how we kind of came up with the categories, high-level categories.
Yeah.
And so that's how we kind of determined how to build kind of the initial versions of the marketplace. But Glovo, from the very, very beginning, has been like an anything delivered app. And specifically to your questions, how do you convince partners, to join when, for example, they're a restaurant, but they look at your app and they say, yeah, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here. And the answer is, at first, obviously, it's very, very difficult. Once you get the volumes up, you just show, hey, listen, if you join our platform, this is the result in your business, and then it's a very easy conversation with the business owner. But in the early days, the earliest merchants, I think they were just believers in the concept.
These early testers, but in the partner.
They really like the concept of having like this kind of multi-site marketplace. And then we also, not just sold them the story, but it's true that we said, like, hey, if we're building a platform where users can buy different types of services, well, then they're more likely to repeat in general using the platform. And even though maybe today they buy from the pharmacy, tomorrow they'll come back and they'll buy from your restaurant, right? And so that was the general, kind of explanation.
Super cool. Speaking about convince different partners.
Yeah.
So you were in the moment that McDonald's started in Glovo. So how was this experience? How did you? Because I know because we've been speaking out of the mic. But how was this experience? I think that's the best experiences I've ever seen in a consumer app.
Yeah.
In this podcast, actually, 100%. So how was this moment?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first, it's really, before we talk about them, I think it's really important to kind of take a step back. So we had this marketplace set up, and we started seeing that we were reaching product market fit. And how do we see that? We saw that majority of users, not the early adopters, but majority of users starting to make orders. So say, okay, we actually got product market fit. We're growing. People were retaining. Had the retention curves, all that kind of stuff, organic growth and things like this. But actually, that's not enough because when Glovo was started, it was definitely, we had a very innovative idea. We came up with actually very unique design and user experience, but there were still a bunch of players out there who were only focused on food, but they were just way ahead of us because they started much earlier
for them, no?
Yeah, they were worth already billions, and we were a small startup, in Barcelona, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is, like, in such an environment, how do you actually grow?
Yeah.
How do you scale? Without raising huge amounts of money, which you're not proposed to do. And so the trick there for Glovo and for any startup in such a position is you need to look at traction channels. And so traction channels is basically a way to acquire users, from a different thing. And there's tons of traction channels.
It seems simple, but this traction channel is the key.
Yeah. Okay.
For a startup in the early days is the key.
Exactly. And so traction channels, like if you want to plot the traction channels, like imagine like you created a chart with an X and Y axis. Yeah. You can plot traction channels. On one thing is like, what is the size of the traction channel? Like how many users can it bring in? And the other axis what you can look at is what is the CAC? Like for that traction channel, what is the cost per user? And when a lot of the times when you look at traction channels, they fall into one of two buckets. Well, there's actually four, but so the first bucket is large traction channels, meaning there's many users you could acquire, but they're very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for example, if you go and you start advertising on Meta, on Instagram or on TikTok, whatever it is, these are huge traction channels, right? Like almost unlimited users, but they're very expensive. Like the cost per user acquisition is very expensive. So like, if you want to bring a lot of users, it's going to cost you lots and lots of money. Okay, then on the other side of the spectrum are traction channels where the user acquisition or the customer acquisition cost is very, very low, but they're not very large acquisition channels, right? So for example, in Glovo, in the early days when we were like 20 employees, we did an email campaign where everyone emailed their friends and family with coupons for things. I mean, it's great. It's cheap, super cheap. It's just sending a few emails and you get a bunch of users, but it's very, very small.
Totally.
Okay. And so typically traction channels, fall in this. And of course, you have the completely useless traction channels that are expensive and very small, but like those ones we don't even think about. But the holy grail of any startup is to find a traction channel that is huge and as cheap as possible, ideally free, right?
It's that's the holy
grail.
The dream of everyone.
And for Glovo, it was McDonald's.
But sorry, before going to McDonald's, like, for the audience, like how the audience can find this traction channel in their startup. Not only like there is not a secret sauce, but every business, I think that if you go more in deep, you can find this one. It's not an obvious traction channel. Like McDonald's, it's obvious that it's huge.
Yeah.
But for another company, could be, I don't know. Like it depends of the company and the market. But it's interesting, like how to go or how to try to find these traction channels on your startup? Like, and probably you didn't explore it, so it's interesting this part.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general advice is you need to do a lot of experimentation, especially early on. I think you may have assumptions of what kind of traction channels are going to work well for your startup, and maybe they will work out. But you need to basically test and see basically, what is the CAC that you're getting users, and see how long it lasts you. And the reality is, like, Glovo didn't have one traction channel. It's not like we acquired all our customers to McDonald's. We had investments in media, we had TV commercials, we had buses painted in Glovo, we have all kinds of stuff, right? So lots of experimentation, lots of playing around. But so the answer is you need to experiment a lot, okay? And of course, be opportunistic if something incredible comes along. Totally. And so the story with McDonald's was a really interesting one. It was basically McDonald's they've decided to go in quite late into the delivery game, and they had decided on a global level that they're going to move into delivery, and they were going to sign like a global partnership with Uber Eats, because Uber Eats at the time was the biggest player in the US. But they would be rolling out delivery, one country at a time, and Spain was probably, I don't know, number 10 on the list. Okay. And so we saw that as an opportunity to see, hey, can we actually do something? And so we approached them over several meetings. And at the time, I think we were just operating in Barcelona, Madrid, and Valencia. Okay. And of course, the proposal we made to them, had several legs. First, from like a business side, we charged them almost no margins. Two, from an expansion point of view, we said we will open any city. You want us to open up, I don't know, Tarragona next week?
Let's go to Tarragona next week.
We'll do it. Yeah. So whatever you want to open. And then the interesting thing from my perspective is we really made a big effort on the product side. Okay, because literally we need to present them like a full blown package. So some of the things that we did on the product side, we presented them and they of course accepted, was like, first of all, small little details, delightful details. So when you were following the courier on the map, when you saw the McDonald's restaurant, you see the little M. There was also, when you signed, I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, you would actually sign the courier's app.
Yeah, I remember.
So if it was a McDonald's order, you'd see the M as well. They were the first merchant or partner that we integrated into their back end, so the orders would go directly to like their kitchen as opposed to like being a tablet. So that was like a big engineering effort. And I think the cherry on top that they really loved, and one of the things I regret to this day was, remember the interface of Glovo? It's kind of like a flower with little bubbles. We promised them a bubble. So they got their own bubble. And basically, the pitch was, you will be one, when a user opens up the app, like they're going to see McDonald's before any other round. Of course, they love this, right? Their own bubble. And Uber Eats, they couldn't offer them a bubble.
No, you will not have bubbles in Uber Eats, sorry.
So basically, it was a combination of, we also promised them dedicated couriers, specifically to make sure their order delivery. So it was a full package, both on the product, on the business, on the expansion side. And together they launched, and we were much faster, of course, than
It was difficult so it was difficult for you to close this deal or not? Like in terms of time?
Yeah, it was several. The business folks worked on it for a number of months, and then when we were getting pretty close, we came in with the extra product proposal, okay. And then it was closed, and that was amazing because we actually had a traction channel. The brand power of McDonald's on a global scale, there's no other restaurant like in our domain that has anything close. And so basically we had this huge marketing machine driving new users into our app that cost us nothing. It was free. And then, and we opened up cities in Spain. And then later on, we signed, that worked so well, we signed a deal with McDonald's Italy. And then we ended up launching many countries, actually with a direct partnership with McDonald's. So it was one of the big, if you look back on the history of all of Glovo, like what were the, top 3 things that made the company successful? Like that deal was probably in the...
Did you see a spike of users like one day to another, like insane? No?
Yeah, it wasn't like the servers melted, but basically, we were seeing, and it's sustained. It was a large acquisition channel, so it's not like it was just like for a week you got a bunch of users. No. It was a nonstop, flow. And interesting, users would come into your app. They would make a McDonald's order first, but then next week they come back and they order maybe a different restaurant. They order sushi, and then the next week they'd order a pharmacy or a grocery or whatever it is. So it was a great thing.
Super cool. Talking more about the moment that a lot of players came back and appeared in Barcelona and in Madrid and in Spain. There was a lot of players, no more companies that were doing delivery. So in a product perspective, how like a company like Glovo, consumer brand with a lot of users, that probably you have to be the first or the second one in the market to win, no? Or not, I don't know. But in a product perspective, how can you like not have a barriers, or how can you deal with that? Like dealing every day with a lot of competitors, with a lot of people that's doing the same. Copycats probably. Think that copy you. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I mean, so it's true. So you don't have to be the first or second to arrive to a market, although it helps, definitely. But you definitely, one of the things we learned as we built out Glovo is that in order for the business to make sense, like on a P&L point of view, like to make profit at some point, you need to end up being either the first or a close second in a market. It's very, very rare that you will see like a market, like a country where you have 3 or 4 or 5 players and they're all making a good business.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. And the reason why it's impossible is because this business is a very high volume, low margins business. And there's a lot of network effects that come into play that as you get more orders, like more customers, more orders, more partners, it basically, it's like a flywheel, and your unit economics continue getting better and better to the point where you're actually you're making profit on every order, right? Because your delivery distance drop, you end up getting better commissions with restaurants, user acquisition costs go down because you're like the default thing. So like all the main KPIs, they just start going in the right direction, and so you can take it into the profitable business. And so your question is like, okay, if you're already in the market with 4 or 5 players, either you need to have a very a great strategy for getting to number 1, number 2. So either you have a ton of cash and you can just like
get deals.
Well, you can try.
No, these are an example of
you can try to just
you will not work it.
Buy your way into the market. You can try to buy out competitors, or you leave. And Glovo's left markets. Glovo has been in situations where, where we would love to, we started, for example, in Paris, and we love France and the French market, but, we were like a 3rd, 4th position. And we just did the calculations like, hey, we're going to have to invest, like, I don't know, $500 million or €1 billion into this market to become number 1. And we just didn't have it. And so, we just decided to shut down the market.
And for example, there are some cases also in Glovo, I think that's super interesting. Africa, no? A super big, huge market that it's not an obvious market for a lot of competitors. And you were there.
Yeah.
So how was this opening Africa with a lot of things there? Probably, I don't know, how to pay, how to... So there's a lot of things on Latam.
Yeah. So when we went international, so I mean, first we expanded, a little bit in Europe, and that was pretty, let's say, easy. We have people, a team called launchers. They go on the ground. They figure out all the the details, because there's a lot of operational details to figure out, and that's not easy, let's say. But like from a product perspective, when it got really interesting is when we expanded to Latin America. This was long before we went to.
It was before Africa.
Before Africa, yeah. And one of the challenges, I mean, there's lots of typical things that you need to do, time zones and all that kind of stuff, but that's not very challenging. The thing that was really interesting for us was, I was doing a call with one of the launchers who was on the ground just scouting the place out, and he's like, hey, Bartek, we're here in Argentina or Peru or whatever it is, and it's like, here everyone pays everything with cash. Like they're like, I've been speaking to other like Domino's delivery, and they're like there or whatever other a place, and they're saying like 90% of their orders, for example, in Argentina is cash. And my face turned a little bit red because we had built a product here in Spain. Everyone pays with a debit card and like cash is everything, and so our product only supported thing. And so the first thing I did was like to see has anyone solved this problem before? I mean, it's a very obvious
typical answer of that problem.
Yeah, and so I figured out that Uber Eats had a solution for this in India and Colombia. And I ended up getting contact with the general manager who had run the Colombian business. I had a call with him. I'm like, hey, tell me about this cash. And he's like, Bartek, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, we're losing 30% of our GMV, like losing it. like
No.
just cash. And I'm like, well, how is that?
Really?
Yeah.
30% of the GMV.
Gone. And I'm like, well, how's that happening? And he says, well, there's two ways. The first one is, as the courier is working, they're accumulating the cash. And if a courier works, like full days, and by the end of the week, like in Colombia, at least the situation was, that they would have accumulated enough cash to be the equivalent of like a couple of months of salary for them. And so, some of them would say, yeah, okay, that's great. It's been fun working for you guys. I'm going to just take this cash and go. And even for the couriers who were, let's just say were honest and loyal, carrying around so much cash in countries in Latin America, there's a lot of like dangerous neighborhoods, and people found out about the fact that Uber Eats couriers were carrying out this cash, and the couriers are basically being robbed and so on and so forth. So a bit of a nightmare. And so I knew, and so the way they were doing it was basically once a week they were collecting the cash from the couriers, and then so on and so forth. So I knew that wasn't going to work. So I decided, me and one of my favorite engineers, his name is Adnan. We got in a room and say, hey, we need to solve this thing, because they're launching here in Latin America, I don't know, in a few weeks, and they're paying with cash, and we can't just like service 10% of the orders and all this kind of stuff. And we came up with a pretty innovative solution, which we called cash recycling. Cash recycling. And basically the idea was we would keep track of like how much cash each courier had on them, and once it got over a certain amount, what would happen is when the courier would get their next order and they would go to the store to pick it up, instead of just having the merchant give them the order, we would instruct the merchant to collect cash from them from that order to reduce the
amount of cash that they have,
their balance. And the merchants are really happy because usually what happened is when Glovo collected everything, we would pay them out their money minus commission at the end of the month.
Okay.
But here they were getting the cash right away. So merchants loved it because they love the cash flow, and it was great for the couriers because we can reduce their thing, and they were safe. And that actually allowed us
extremely good
to launch really, really quickly in a lot of Latin American markets, because later on we actually adapted, and we had other additional ways of like collecting the money and like drop off points and things like this. But time, was of the essence to be able to like launch these markets really, really quickly. And this was the solution we came up with. Yeah.
It's super interesting. Actually, more things about when you open or close a market. One question here is, okay, so there is a metric that's incredible important, is the revenue or GMV. How much money do you make in this market? And this could be a relevant metric to close a market or to continue operating there. But what more metrics in a product perspective did you look at? So when
to
you
decide whether to close a market.
Yeah.
So I mean,
or to open a new one.
Oh, okay. So
there's difference.
Yeah, so, they're kind of overlapping, but a bit different, right? So from opening a market, it wasn't you don't have you don't have a product metrics yet, right? But there was a whole bunch of things. We had a team that had like a big spreadsheet, and they would look at a number of things, basically, what competition exists. Do we have McDonald's? Can we go in with McDonald's? That was always a good one. What are the costs of the couriers, and we had like a whole list of 10 things.
Average GMV of the people.
You check them off,
salary,
weighted average, and then you decide when to go to the market. And then in terms of closing the market, of course, you need to give it a bit of time. So there's an initial kind of investment that you put into the market. But basically, the fundamental question that you need to ask yourself is not specifically a product question, and it's more of a business question. The product is part of the business, of course, but the question is, do we see a path, like a reasonable path to become number one or a close second, right? So then you have to kind of work backwards. It's like, okay, well, what's your position in the market? What's your position in the market versus the leader, right? And like, what is the gap? You can get metrics from lots of websites in terms of like whether it's site visits or app users. So you can kind of estimate more or less how far behind you are. You know how many users you have. You have your own metrics, right? So you know how many orders you're doing. More important than users, actually, how many orders you're doing. You can figure out how many orders your big competitors doing. You have your customer acquisition costs. You have your churn. Like, you have all those metrics, and you can basically pretty much figure out. Basically, it's like, I mean, there's like lots of criteria, but like from a marketing investment point of view, like how much do I need to invest in this market? And then of course, there may be other things to actually get to a point where I've reached, or at least tied this person. If it's something that is reasonable, then you continue in the market. If it's something completely crazy that then it doesn't make sense, because you're just in a market. You'll never get to this. The business will always be eating money from your bottom line, and yeah,
this is not safe. But it could be tricky because, for example, if you are in a market that your direct competitor is doing a lot of discounts, is burning money in this market, but your product is better. You've seen that your retention is better. The users that you have, they place more than 2, 3, 4 orders. Yeah. It could be tricky because in terms of revenue, probably it's like a sign to close this market. But then in terms of product metrics or things quite a bit more complex, it could be a sign to continue.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
That's a good, and we experienced that many times. And you recognize, when your competitors are burning cash, and there your strategy is try to wait it out and hope that that they're gonna support run. I mean, a very good
it's the reality.
But a very good example was with the quick grocery delivery thing, right? So, but the whole bunch of players like Get It and a whole bunch of other players.
The newcomers.
The newcomers, they came in and they were raised huge amounts of money. They were flooding in. They were just giving away. They were giving away for everyone free groceries, and of course, we were in a position to do the same.
Totally.
Right, but we knew that like they were just burning money, and of course that is going to run out at some point. And like of course you're stressed because you're seeing people coming in. Oh yeah, Get It. Soon the brands are starting to go, yeah, I want to work with Get It, blah blah. And you just gotta say, you know what, this is not going to last forever, and you need to just kind of believe that like they're actually educating the market because they're using their money to get people to do grocery delivery that maybe haven't done grocery delivery in the past. And fundamentally that your product is superior because in the end, they're just a fast grocery delivery. And we have that plus a whole bunch of other stuff, right? And so, we could build, for example, a Prime product where you can pay a monthly fee, and not only do you get your groceries delivered, but you have, your flowers and your restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And so we knew we had a superior product. I mean, they had way more money to burn on this thing. And it's just a matter of sitting tight and waiting for it to end. And it did end, right? Because in the end, they couldn't get any kind of proper business built.
It was insane, this moment of, I remember the WooCommerce, the Get It, they were burning money. Like, I think that was 50 euros discount or 30 euros discount for new users. And every week it was a new discount. All right, Bartek, going more in the present. So you decide to move to another adventure. Yeah. And this adventure is Ara. Mm-hmm. Ara, now in Catalan. And first question here, how was this shift, this change to working in a super scale-up company to starting your own? So super different types of working now.
Yeah.
Probably the product manager or the product people in the first days, you will do more things than a product manager because you are the founder. So how was this transition?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a pretty big transition, as you can imagine. I know I stayed in Glovo for 8 years, and I stayed that long because it was growing a lot and you always had new challenges. But, definitely like in the early days of Glovo, like from the moment I joined for the first 3-4 years, it was... I definitely had an experience where like every day I was waking up and jumping out of bed and excited to go to work.
It's like the best way to work. Yeah?
I would feel 10 out of 10. And, as the business matures and gets bigger, I mean, there's some really nice things. Maybe you get a larger salary or whatever it is, and you have a bigger team and new responsibilities. But you're dealing with a lot of big organizational problems. And on the product side, there's a lot more value for like minor optimizations, right? So like if you can decrease delivery time by 1% or reduce credit card fraud by 2%. I mean, at the end, it's a lot of money. And so you end up, as a product organization, you end up dedicating lots of time and effort on these kind of smaller type of features. And it's okay, but I wasn't when I compare myself to the early days of Glovo, it wasn't the same level of excitement. And so for me, moving to Ara is going back to those early days of Glovo, right? Yeah. So I'm again waking up in the morning, super excited, jumping out of bed, getting ready to work, and I have 10 out of 10 days. So and I think there's one other really interesting thing. I think when you're in a large company, especially if you're up in senior management, you don't get so hands-on in a lot of things. It's just hard because you have other responsibilities. And one of the really nice things of going back to like a very, very early stage is you get to like actually even like, I don't know, for example, like you mentioned, I'm doing go-to-market stuff. Like I've never done go-to-market stuff. I'm setting up a CMS, which sounds like the most boring thing in the world. But I'm super excited, connecting the CMS to a Typeform, to some kind of AI cold outreach tool and get it all done. And so you end up really kind of getting to again play around with like the tools and just build stuff from the ground up. So it's super exciting.
It's incredible. So what is Ara? What is the problem actually? What is the problem that Ara is solving now? And what's the problem that you solve? You mentioned earlier a little bit, but what's exactly the exact problem that you solve?
So I mean, organizations, big and small, they spend a lot of their teams within the organization spend a lot of their work week in meetings. And, meetings are valuable, right? This is a time where, teams can get together, discuss, brainstorm, debate, come up with conclusions, action items. But at the same time, everyone recognizes that meetings are, very inefficient.
Yeah.
Okay.
Super inefficient.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is, this is the big problem space. We were saying, how can we reimagine meetings to make them like dramatically more efficient than they are today? And, to kind of go into that a little bit deeper, we said like, what is it actually that makes these meetings inefficient? And we kind of identified three things. So the first one is what we call time to meet, which is, so let me give a product example since the product podcast, right? Yeah. So let's just say you have, I don't know, a new idea for a feature, let's say for whatever you're building, okay? And maybe you write up a small Notion page about it, whatever it is, and you're like, now it's time, I need to like discuss this idea, brainstorm it with some few people. So you're like, okay, I need my engineering counterpart, I should bring in my designer, I have an APM on my team that's training, and they follow me to every meeting. So let's bring my APM, and then maybe I don't know someone from finance because you're changing some part of the billing part of the product. Okay, right. So you open up your Google Calendar, you find these people, you find time slot 3 days from now, you schedule that meeting. Now, for the next 3 days, that idea, whatever sits basically. So any kind of like actions or action items or things that are going to come out of that meeting, well, you have to wait for that meeting to happen. And that's a huge opportunity cost. And it happens over and over again. And I said 3 days to take an example. In some companies,
it could be more.
It could be a week or two, depending on who's in the meeting. So that's the first big inefficiency of meetings today, synchronous meetings. Second one is the actual time in the meeting, okay? So again, think about the same meeting. So let's imagine let's do the happy path. Everyone accepted. You didn't have to reschedule. 3 days go by. Let's assume everyone shows up to the video, the Zoom at the same time. No one's late.
In Spain, it's not normal.
Well, let's just think, that's no doubt. No one's, you're not sitting around waiting for people to show up. And let's say the meeting's 45 minutes. What it means is basically all the participants in the meeting need to dedicate 45 minutes to the meeting. And the reality is there's a few people in that meeting that might actually be interested in the nitty-gritty details of the meeting, but there are some people who are only interested in certain parts of the meeting. And there's some people maybe are very, very high level, and only if a specific topic is reached, or maybe they're just there to answer a few questions. Maybe the finance guy showed up, just like if someone asked me a question about the invoicing, I can tell them what it is, right? But anyways, they end up sitting.
This is normal.
They end up sitting through the 45 minutes.
These are real situation.
Very inefficient. And the last one is calendar fragmentation. So in an organization that has lots of meetings, you end up with these calendars where you have like meetings all over the place. And that's really bad for deep work. So, I don't know, an engineer, they start coding like, I got to stop because it's time for the stand-ups. They do their stand-up and they go back to coding. Oh, now it's time for one-on-one with X person. And so that's like a third, real big inefficiency that we identified. And if you think about all three of those, the root cause of all this is time synchronization. Okay.
And the product managers that only.
Yes, that's fine.
No, sorry. So that my audience is product managers and product designers. So this pain actually we suffer. So it's normal.
Yeah, and so then the question is so what is the what is the big idea behind ARA? So. Back in the day, before even video conferencing, we'd have a big table and chairs all around, and when we want to have a meeting, we would set a time and a place for it, and we'd do our meetings. And at some point, we invented video conferencing. Okay, and what video conferencing allowed us to do was to remove one constraint, which was location. So now all of a sudden, we could have the same meeting at the same time, but we could be in different places. As long as you had a computer with a camera and an internet connection, it was great. And it turns out that was a lot more efficient by removing the constraint. And many meetings, a majority of meetings, especially for like hybrid companies or remote companies, have moved to video conferencing, right? The big idea behind ARA is to remove one more constraint, which is time. So not only do we not need to be in the same place, we also don't need to meet at the same time. And that brings another level of efficiency where you could do meetings. So those three problems that I mentioned earlier, for example, time to meet, now you don't have to wait 3 days for that meeting to happen. So in ARA, you record the first contribution to the meeting, invite your participants, and it goes off.
Alone? You record it alone?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You add your participants in the meeting, like a group or whatever it is, and then it gets fired off. And a lot of times what we find is the ARA meeting actually finishes before the actual like synchronous meeting would happen 3 days before, right? And the second thing is the actual time dedicated to the meeting itself. So again, remember in the previous example, like everyone is 45 minutes or 1 hour or whatever it is in the meeting. With ARA, because it's asynchronous, each of the participants can actually determine the level of engagement in the meeting, depending on like what the topic is. And so we built a lot of product features, some of them leveraging AI to make it a lot more efficient. I'll give you an example. So in ARA, for example, a very simple one is you can watch the videos in 2x speed. Okay, very simple. But then we have a whole bunch of like AI tools. So when you come inside a meeting, you can actually have AI. We have AI summaries for each of the contributions to the meeting. So not just like when a meeting's finished and the final AI summary that you get some of these tools. Like as you're in the meeting, you can actually see the contributions and have high-level AI summaries. So you can actually read through them and just like dive into a part of the meeting that you're interested in.
That's cool.
Or we also feed all the transcription of the meeting into an LLM. And so basically at any point in time in the meeting, you have kind of like a meeting assistant. You can ask them questions about like, I don't know, has anyone asked me for help? Well, what is the big conflict in the meeting? Give me a high level summary. So we've built out lots of really, really smart ways for people to consume and participate in meetings where in the end, actually, you end up spending less time in the ARA meeting than if you were in the synchronous meeting.
In the synchronous meeting. And the ARA meeting has the end. So when it finished.
So ARA meetings. So an ARA meeting has a beginning. It has a list of participants. It has a topic, whatever is being discussed. It has the content, which is like the contributions, and it has an end. And so the way it works is basically anyone, but usually it's the person who starts the meeting. When they've reached the conclusion of whatever the topic is, they close the meeting. Everyone gets an AI summary in their inbox. But basically, the general interface of ARA when you come into the product is you just see a list of your currently open meetings, and you can basically either consider new content for you to consume, or you can add new content. Of course, you can create a new meeting, or you can dive into a specific meeting and like watch the videos, read the AI summaries, dive into certain parts. Yeah,
super cool. It remembers me a little bit on the community products like Discord, Slacks, not more Discord than Slack. Mm-hmm. When you are we created a community of, it's called product makers. Basically, this community, we have product makers, so people that's building products with AI. And as a community, there are a lot of channels, and each channel has a topic.
Yeah.
And when you create a channel, there's like a sub-channel that you can create to discuss something.
Yeah.
And this has a beginning and this has an end.
Yeah.
So I think that's super interesting, like this comparison. But one question here, like, do you pretend to eliminate synchronous meetings, or you can a company could work with sync and async?
Yeah. So what we found is, if you take a look at the typical, tech company, if you just open up, the average person opens up their calendar, over 90% of the meetings that they're having right now in a synchronous way actually work better in Ada. So I'll give you examples. Stand-ups work amazing. One-on-ones,
stand-ups, yeah, totally.
One-on-ones work amazing.
Daily, stand-ups daily.
Status reviews work amazing. We have a screen sharing feature. So product demos, design reviews, product reviews. On the engineering side, complex code reviews are super cool. Like simple ones, engineers, they don't need to do it. But when there's a very, very complicated code review, it's amazing for that. And then you can have other meetings that are maybe a little bit less common and maybe for like larger companies. But for example, when companies are interviewing people, we don't actually use Ada for the interviews themselves, but usually afterwards there's a meeting where like all the participants kind of get together and they discuss and they make a hiring decision. Yeah. It's always super difficult to arrange. There's like 5 people, it takes 2 weeks and the candidate's waiting, they have another offer, but this meeting is happening too. So again, amazing for that. Just in general communication from like, I don't know, from a CEO to the company. So like over 90% of the meetings that are happening today in a typical product development company actually work much, much better in Ada. Yeah.
Well, one question here also could be that, you are building this product so how the product works is an app, it's a native app that you work in your mobile and then you record in your mobile, or it works in also your desktop? Like, how is the product itself?
Yeah, so we have a web desktop version, fully functional, and then we also have an iOS and Android app. What's interesting is we find, because we already have companies using the product, what we find is both products are used, I would say, equally as much. Like we had initially thought that it would be a lot more heavy to desktop. What we find looking at the stats is for contributing, so like adding, like recording a new video and adding it, actually happens more on the desktop than on the mobile.
So and mobile more for consuming, no?
And people use it for consuming. But it's not to say that people don't record. We see, our own team, people record stand-ups, from the train, or from the plane or from a taxi. So there are still really nice moments where people actually use the mobile to record, but we do see a little bit more weight on the consumption side of things than on the
on the recording.
Yeah.
It's interesting for me, Ara, also for more shy people.
Yeah.
People that probably his or her social skills are not the best ones.
Yeah.
And in a meeting with a lot of people, probably they don't express what they think, no? So it's interesting, this use case. And in our ecosystem with product people, engineers, designers, this happens.
Yeah.
And this use case, I think, is super interesting.
There's a few. So I told you that the direct efficiency gains from using Ada, but there's once we start testing with companies and we start getting feedback, we've actually identified like 3 other really interesting benefits of working this way. One of which you've named, which is kind of democratizing participating in meetings. Because in a live meeting, whether it's in person or in video call, you have some personality of certain people who are just they just speak louder, they interrupt people sometimes, and that causes certain personalities to basically just not to participate. And with Ada, everyone has it's a very asymmetric product. Everyone has the same abilities and opportunities to participate, and we find that people participate more. And by the way, we also offer the ability to turn off the camera. So like if you want to just do an audio only note, you have like a bad hair day or whatever it is, we do that. But anyways, that was the first unanticipated kind of benefit. The second one is the ability to actually think before actually responding. So when you're doing a live meeting, there's this natural pressure to just on the spot say something smart. Otherwise, people are going to look at you and like, what is? And very frequently, even to the best, the people who are, really, really good at what they do, sometimes the way that they express an idea doesn't come out the right way, or even maybe they completely forget about something and 10 minutes after the meeting, like, oh my God, I should have said something else completely. With Ada, we've gotten this feedback. People are like, it's not all the time, but sometimes I really need to like take 5-10 minutes and think about what is it? And we find the actual quality of the contributions to the meetings are better in Ada than in a regular meeting. And the last one, the last kind of like unexpected thing that we didn't design for, but it's happened really, is for teams that work in multiple time zones. What ends up happening, imagine you have like a team between the US and Europe, or Europe and Asia, or whatever it is. What happens is, there's some unfortunate people that, every time it's 9 p.m., they're having dinner with their family. They have to like stop whatever they're doing and get on a video call because thing. And, with Ada, they can finish their dinner and basically, add their contribution or consume content, and, they love it as well. So those are kind of three things cool. we didn't design for, but as a consequence of building it this way.
Super cool. Bartek, going to go-to-market that you mentioned that you are working now in go-to-market, did you find this traction channel for Ada? And if you find it, what is this? Like
so super. I mean, first of all, we're a super early stage right now, and I think every product, like I said, you need to test different traction channels, and there's ones that are going to work better than the other ones. With regards to Ada, it is like a category defining product. So it's something very innovative, quite new, and I think the go-to-market strategy that we are pursuing, at least for now, is really just to find ways to talk about the product, like in a podcast, for example, but to do a LinkedIn post and stuff. And because when people read about innovative solutions to problems they have, it's a very great way for attracting, could
be these early testers, as we mentioned before, could be this.
For now, we're at that stage, right? Yeah. And so right now we're just focusing on actions, whether it's giving talks at conferences, doing a podcast, LinkedIn post, basically actions where we're able to talk about actually this paradigm shift, and then the actual product that accompanies this paradigm shift. And that actually gets a lot of people excited. We get a lot of like inbound, outreaches of people saying, "Hey, sounds really cool. It's a problem that we're having. Show me the product. How does it work?"
And how do you approach this? Because I think that this is the question for first-time founders, in my case, for example.
Yeah.
That this first, you show your product to a company or to an individual, and they like it. Yep. So what's the next step? Like you try for free, you try for free your product. You try to have a small income of money just to validate that this product works for this company. Like, how do you do that? And be careful, because we have Google Meet, Zoom, and all this stuff that in a personal way, probably Google, for companies not, but for individuals, it's free. You can use Google Meet for free. So you have to compete against probably these companies that will be in these free trials, or free business models.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like in the first stage now?
I mean, there's two questions. So the first one is,
people have to pay or not in his first.
Yeah. So I think it really depends on the product. So the general answer should be you should validate that and get people to pay.
Yeah.
But in the case of, for example, Ada, and I'll tell you why not, we don't charge to start. And the reason being is that Ada is a product that has strong network effects. Basically, it doesn't work by just one person. You need a team using it. Okay.
Or a company.
Well, you need to start with the team, and it's also a paradigm shift. So there's a lot of things that are happening here that you need to that are, let's say, barriers to starting. And so it's not like you're selling in a SaaS product to one specific person, that one buyer, that one person's going to use it, and so on and so forth. You really need to like onboard like an entire team, could you be like 8 people, 10 people, whatever it is. And it's going to be part of their everyday workflow, right? And it's a different way of working. And so adding another layer of complexity, like they need to check with their CFO, is just not something that we want to do for a product that has strong network effects like this. And our goal right now at the current stage is get as much feedback as possible, right? So we're trying to optimize the feedback loop.
Feedback loop.
That said, I mean, you need to have some kind of confidence that like at some point you'll be able to monetize this. And right now we get in a few things. Right now we basically see there's lots of products that if they bring efficiency to companies, and the efficiencies that we're talking about are very, very substantial. And you can literally map it out to dollars. I can calculate how much time each employee is going to save, how it is. And so if you compare that to what you would expect to charge them on a per seat basis, it's a very simple calculation. So, and even like when you're speaking with customers, they, for our earliest, not customers, but users, they actually ask me like, hey, how much are you going to charge me for this? And they literally give the feedback like, if this does what it's supposed to do, like we'll pay you. Like it's not a big deal. And so we're at the stage, and I'm not saying we won't move into the monetization. Of course we will. We're at the stage right now where we are the most important is to crack the product, because it's not an easy product to crack.
Yeah.
And you have this additional kind of challenge of network effects, which are really challenging at first, but then play to your advantage, right?
Yeah.
Once you have network effects built into a product.
And then also there's the typical strategy PLG things that, for example, Notion or products like that, they try to go bottoms up, no? So they try to first attract the individuals that they will use for these personal projects, whatever. And the question here is, what is your strategy, or what do you think that will happen?
Yeah.
Like, for example, no, as a PM,
yeah,
I think that having ARA could improve super in a high level confidence the efficiency of the team, but also as an engineer, because I don't want to be in my stand-up, so I prefer recording every day.
Yeah,
that happens in my company, in my last company. Some engineers they type it in Slack what they were building, and they didn't attend to the meeting. No? So what is this? If you are going bottoms up, what is the first user that you are going?
So really interesting. Originally, before we started any kind of go-to-market notion, we just assumed it's going to be bottom up. We're like, Slack.
We all assume that.
We assume this. And it turns out, after a lot of experimentation...
Super difficult, eh?
As it turns out, with a lot of experimentation and talking to users, for our product, and I'll tell you why in a second, actually top-down or middle-down actually works a lot better. And the reason is that the core entity of ARA are meetings and replacing meetings. And what you need to do is you need to acquire the person who is creating meetings.
Yeah.
Right?
Why creating or not consuming?
Because everything starts with a meeting being created. Someone decides which tool a meeting is going to be created in, right?
Yeah.
And so it's usually, and it depends on the size.
Totally.
Depending on the size of the company, but like what we found that works super, super well, like if it's a very small startup, it'll be the CEO. If it's a slightly larger, CPOs work really well, COOs and their team, because they're the ones that are generating, they're the ones that are driving forward meetings. And so it's not to say that like an engineer or designer can create a meeting. Yeah, we have designers who start now meetings with a design review and use the product. But through experimentation, we've just realized that it's a much, much better, easier way for us to enter a thing, going either, I didn't necessarily from the top. It could be middle. It doesn't mean that product-led growth can't work. I mean, we have lots of mechanisms within the tool for anyone once they get inside of it to create a new meeting, to invite new people, which are not on the tool, and you have like all these kind of like growth loops, built into the product. So, but the initial spark within an organization, so far, what we've learned is we're getting a lot more success first onboarding people who are the ones usually creating the meetings.
No, super cool approach, and it makes a ton of sense. One idea that it came to my head now is, for example, in Twitter, if you consume Twitter, you will see like a lot of people that is showing or doing a demo of their product on Twitter. No?
Yeah.
And usually, how they do that? They do with a screenshot, with a beautiful screenshot, with a nice background, with Arc browser, or with a video. No, so it could be super interesting to have this PLG and this first attraction, to have a ARA link and to see like the product not only in a video, more in a loom, like more loom that they were doing this shareable, super easy shareable links to see a 5 minutes or less, 2 minutes demo, and to see the product in action. Also, it's an idea. It could be interesting or not, but more in, and just to finish with Ara, what is like your vision as a founder now? Like, what type of company do you want to build now with AI? That we are seeing that product trios or product teams are now becoming more smaller. Companies of 50 employees or 100 employees are making millions and millions of euros. So what is the type of company that?
So Jordi and I, when we first got together, even before we even started on ADA or any idea, we had a few things very, very clear. First of all, we want to build something big and impactful. This means, whether it's a consumer product or a B2B product, whatever it is, we wanted to build something that's going to have, Jordi's worked at Instagram, at Snapchat, I worked at Amazon, Glovo. We're not here to build like something, for a local market. And so we want something that's really going to impact millions of people. So that was number one. And then number two, we really wanted to build something that scales easily. And I personally had the experience working at Glovo, and it was a really fun experience. But Glovo is a very difficult, there's a lot of operational on the ground, boots on the ground type of work that needs to happen to scale such a business. And it's very expensive and complicated to do so. And I had it clear that I wanted like a software only a business where, we could be very, very successful, whether it's with 10, 30 or 50, I don't care. But
whatever,
what I didn't want is thousands of employees. What we didn't want is like thousands of employees. And so that was kind of like a very high level a framework for thing. And I think with ADA and now with all the advances of AI, it's just becoming easier. You just need less of everyone. How many people in the end will need to make it a really big business? Okay, we'll see. But I'm confident we don't need thousands of people.
Last question, and I will try also to have two questions in one. So what is your first recommendation for people that are just starting now in product? Okay, more in product management or product design.
Okay,
with your experience, I think that your feedback will be super useful. But the other, I think that for me, it's the most interesting is how do you think that the future of software going to product people will look like? Do you think that PMs or PDs will go more as a product makers, product builders, people with different skills? With AI, programming, designing, a PM will program, will do prototypes, will do design. So a designer will also. So what do you see like the future of product and software itself? People that's working software.
I think I can answer both questions in one, and it's the same answer for past, present, and future. So within a company or a business, you have several domains, right? So you have like, I'm not going to list all of them, there's just tons of them, but like you have technical, like the engineering side of things. Then you have like the data, like being able to analyze data or build models around data. You have like design, being able to build good UX design. You have like being able to speak to customers and users and do user research. There's understanding the business, what are the the levers for the, top line, bottom line, all this kind of stuff. You have understanding how legal works, how like the finance works. I mean, it's just a lot of things. And I think, having a profile where you are able to connect the dots with as many of these domains as possible has a lot of value. It's had a lot of value in the past. It has a lot of value today, and it's going to have a lot of value. So you can call it product management, you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really product make or anything. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So I think if that idea excites you in the sense that you're not excited about just being a specialist in one domain or maybe two domains, but you really get excited about learning a lot of these different domains and connecting the dots between these domains and making a smart way, then I think there will be a lot of that creates a lot of value because not that many people in an organization that can do that. And so if you can, we'll talk about how to do it in a second, but like if that excites you and you can get to the point where you can connect those dots, then I think you're going to have an exciting career and whatever it's called.
So be generalist, no? The word generalist, or when you start a company or when you are the 10 employees of Glovo or the first employee in whatever, you are a generalist.
Yeah, you are a generalist, but you also, you need to have some level of depth in all those fields. I mean, you can say a generalist and not know anything about anything.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Totally. Yeah.
So it's a matter of, of everyone's probably starts with, some depth in one field. And say you're an engineer from background like I was, so you have a lot of experience on, some coding and architecture or whatever it is. And then you need to find different ways of gaining exposure and depth in those areas. So it could be everything from like reading a book to taking a course to building something. It depends on what the actual domain is that you want to do. But you need to find ways to kind of throw yourself in the deep end of that new domain and get experience there. And I think the more of these that you can kind of link together, the more value you can add to a business. And then I think there's plenty of really cool stuff you can do. Everything from being a founder of a startup to being products person or whatever it is. Yeah.
Super cool, Bartek. How people can try Ara? You can try Ara, people, for the people that it's
yeah. So we have the website is arameets.co.
Okay.
Yeah. And there you could sign up for a wait list, and we're pretty much every week onboarding new teams. Yeah.
Super cool, Bartek. Thank you so much for being here. I think that it has been a pleasure to have this level of product leader.
This is a lot of fun.
This is the example of product leader. That's why we name it Product Leaders Podcast. And thank you so much. And the most of the luck for you and your co-founder, Jordi, with Ara. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Y nos vemos la semana que viene. Chao, chao.